I'm Jack Wilson. I'm 32 years old, and my own mother uninvited me from my sister's wedding via a cold, two-sentence text message. Before I tell you how I turned their dream wedding into a nightmare they could never wake up from, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always cool to see how far these stories travel. Alright, let's get into it. The office was dead quiet, the kind of deep, humming silence that only exists late on a weeknight when the entire city outside seems to have gone to sleep. It was almost 10 p.m. The only light came from my monitor, casting a sterile blue glow on my desk, illuminating the half-empty coffee cup and the stack of papers for a marketing proposal I was determined to finish. This project was my baby, a major client, the kind of win that makes the long hours feel worth it. It was a testament to the life I had built for myself, brick by painstaking brick. That's when my phone buzzed, a sharp, intrusive vibration on the polished wood of the desk. The screen lit up, Mom. A small, tired smile touched my lips. I figured it was the usual late-night check-in. Are you eating enough? Are you working too hard? For a fleeting moment, I felt that familiar, faint flicker of hope. The one that whispers, maybe this time it'll be different. It wasn't. I tapped the screen, and the message opened. 2 sentences, all caps, felt less like a text and more like a court summons. You're not coming to the wedding. I read it once, then twice. The words seemed to blur, to disconnect from any logical meaning. It had to be a joke, a bizarre, cruel typo. But then my eyes dropped to the second line, the explanation that was really an execution. Emma's family doesn't want you there. A cold fist clamped around my lungs, squeezing the air out. Emma's family? The phrase echoed in the silent room. I was Emma's family. I was her only brother. I was the one who taught her how to ride a bike, the one who sat through her terrible high school plays, the one who held her while she cried after her first breakup. Just 2 weeks ago, I had spent a Saturday afternoon in a stuffy bridal boutique, nodding patiently as she debated the merits of ivory versus champagne satin, even offering to chip in for the ridiculously expensive veil she'd fallen in love with. We had laughed. It had felt normal. My mind raced, trying to find a reason, an argument, a fight I'd had that could possibly lead to this. There was nothing. This wasn't the heat of battle. This was a cold, premeditated strike. 1,000 angry replies stormed my mind. How dare you? After everything I've done? But the anger dissolved as quickly as it came, leaving behind the familiar, bitter residue of resignation. Anger, I had learned long ago, was a luxury I couldn't afford in my family. It was seen as an inconvenience, a disruption to their carefully curated peace. What they understood was currency. What they understood was leverage. And in that moment, staring at the glowing screen, a cold, crystalline clarity washed over me. The years of being the family ATM, the on-call therapist, the reliable, invisible pillar holding up their crumbling facade. It all coalesced into a single, hard point of decision. A strange, tight smile stretched my lips. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had finally accepted the game was rigged and had decided to flip the whole board over. My fingers, steady now, typed a single question. So you chose status over blood? The 3 little dots appeared, then vanished. She didn't reply. She didn't have to. The silence was the answer. I turned back to my computer, the multi-million-dollar proposal completely forgotten. I opened a new browser tab, my movements precise and deliberate. I logged into the joint bank account I had established for the wedding. My dad had called it a practical way to manage expenses. I knew it was a Trojan horse, designed to give them easy access to my help. But I had built a secret wall inside it. A 2-factor authorization, linked to my phone, required for any transaction over $500. A lesson learned the hard way. My mouse arrow hovered over the Account Services tab. I felt no rage, no sadness. Just the quiet, clean hum of a machine executing its primary function. I was a circuit, and a switch had just been flipped. I clicked, Freeze account. A confirmation box appeared. Reason for this action? My fingers flew across the keyboard. Suspected fraudulent activity and misuse of funds by other account holders. Confirmed. Next, the cloud folder. I had named it Emma and Ryan's big day. It held 63 files. Every contract, every invoice, every deposit slip, every seating chart. A monument to the hours of my life I had poured into her happiness. I selected all. I didn't delete them. Deletion was an act of passion. This was an act of logic. I moved them all into a new, encrypted folder titled JW Archives, Private. Password protected. The shared folder was now a digital ghost town. I renamed it. The new name was a simple, elegant message. Good luck without me. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking in the profound silence. The first tremors of the earthquake I had just triggered were already beginning. They just hadn't felt them yet. They thought they had cut me out. They had no idea they had just amputated the very limb that was feeding them. The digital silence I had created lasted less than 10 minutes. The real-world silence was shattered when my phone, which I'd forgotten to mute, shrieked across my quiet desk. It was Mom. I stared at her name, letting the call ring out until it bounced to voicemail. A second later, a text banner flashed across the screen. Jack, what did you do? The caterer just called. The payment was declined. I watched the message fade. The first sign of panic. A small, grim satisfaction settled in my chest. The phone rang again. I silenced it with my thumb. Another text from Mom, more frantic this time. This isn't funny, Jack. Pick up the phone. You're embarrassing us. Embarrassing them. That was always the cardinal sin. Not cruelty, not betrayal. Embarrassment. The phone rang a third time. Mom. Something inside me, a dark and weary curiosity, made me answer. Perhaps I needed to hear the words, to have the final nail hammered into the coffin of my hope. What is wrong with you? She launched in, her voice a high-pitched nail on a chalkboard. There was no hello, no concern, just the raw, unfiltered sewage of her indignation. What's wrong with me? I repeated, my own voice eerily calm. It felt like it was coming from someone else, a detached observer watching a play. You're the one who disowned your son over a text message, and you're asking what's wrong with me? Oh, don't be so dramatic, she scoffed, and the dismissive sound of it was a time machine. It hurled me back through the years. It was the sound of every scraped knee, every broken toy, every moment my feelings had been deemed an inconvenience. You are making this entire situation about you, as you always do. This is Emma's big day. It's the most important day of her life. We are trying to make a good impression on the Coopers. Do you have any idea how much this connection means for your father's business? Making it all about me. The accusation was so familiar, so practiced. And my mind, against my will, plunged back into the cold, sterile environment of an emergency room. I was 10 years old. The fluorescent lights of the hospital hummed overhead, making my skin look pale and sickly. A sharp, radiating pain pulsed from my left forearm, which was bent at an angle that defied nature. My sister, Emma, who was 13, sat across from me, her face buried in our mother's new cashmere coat, her shoulders shaking with what appeared to be sobs. She had pushed me. We were in the old treehouse in our backyard. I was on the rope ladder and she wanted to come down. Wait, the rung is cracked. I'd yelled up at her. She'd rolled her eyes. Move, slowpoke, she'd snapped, and then she just shoved my hands off the rope. I remembered the sensation of falling, the rush of air, and the sickening loud snap when I hit the ground. The doctor, a kind man with tired eyes, was trying to ask me what had happened. I opened my mouth, the truth on my tongue, but my mother caught my eye from across the room. She gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head. It was a look I knew well. It was the don't you dare cause a scene look. He fell, my mother announced, her voice smooth as silk as she stroked Emma's hair. He's always been such a clumsy boy, a bit of a dreamer. Weren't you, sweetie? She said, looking at me. It wasn't a question. It was an order. Later, in the back seat of the car, my arm encased in a heavy plaster cast, I whispered, Mom. Emma pushed me. She lied. My mother sighed, a long, theatrical, put-upon sigh. The exact same sigh she'd just used on the phone with me 22 years later. "Jack, please," she'd said, adjusting her rearview mirror to look at me. "Don't make this all about you. Emma feels absolutely terrible. She's been crying for hours. Can't you, for once, just think about your sister's feelings and let it go?" I'd looked in the mirror, past my mother's perfectly coiffed hair, and saw Emma's reflection. Her eyes weren't red from crying. They were dry, and they were fixed on my reflection. And as our eyes met, she gave me a slow, deliberate wink. A wink of pure, unadulterated victory. That was the day I learned the fundamental law of physics in our family. The truth was irrelevant. All that mattered was the preservation of Emma's happiness. At any cost. My pain was the price. "Jack, are you even listening to me?" My mother's shrill voice yanked me back to the cold reality of my office. "Oh, I'm listening," I said, the words tasting like rust in my mouth. "I've been listening my entire life. I hear you loud and clear. You need me to be the villain of this story so you can look good for your wealthy new in-laws. The narrative requires a sacrifice. And I've been nominated. You are being completely unreasonable and selfish," she cried, her voice cracking with what she probably thought was convincing emotion. "After everything we have done for you, how could you be so ungrateful?" Ungrateful. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of that word almost made me laugh. My mind, a reluctant historian, presented another exhibit. Last year, panic Sunday afternoon. I was supposed to be at a friend's barbecue, enjoying a rare day off. Instead, I was at my parents' kitchen table staring at my father, Robert. He looked shrunken, pathetic, his usual bluster deflated. He'd been trying to play the stock market, using tips from his buddies at the golf club. He'd borrowed from his 401k, lost it, then tried to chase his losses with more. He was in a hole, a $7,000 hole. My father, the man who had relentlessly mocked my internet job, who had advised me to get a real man's career with a pension and benefits, was now effectively begging me to save him from his own foolishness. And what did I do? I did what I always did. I played my part. I took the money I had been diligently saving for a down payment on a condo, the fruit of my not a real job, and I transferred it to his account. I typed loan in the memo line, a sad little joke for an audience of one. "You're a good boy, Jack," he'd said, his relief making him magnanimous. "A real lifesaver. We'll pay you back, son." First thing. The check, of course, never came. Just like the check for Emma's $6,800 in back rent never came. Just like the check for the $3,200 in damages from her wild bachelorette party never came. I had a spreadsheet. It was my secret shame and my secret validation. A file named the family tax. Every loan, every gift, every bailout was recorded. Date, amount, reason. It was a monument to their needs and my weakness. "I have to go," I said into the phone, my voice devoid of all emotion. "I have a deadline. Jack, don't you dare hang up on me. You will fix this right now. Do you hear me? Your sister is hysterical." I pressed the red icon on my screen, severing the connection. My hand was trembling, but not from anger. It was the tremor of a limb that has just been freed from a crushing weight. It was the frightening, exhilarating shake of pure liberation. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't have saved, but instantly recognized. "Uncle Thomas. Your dad called me, ranting and raving. I can guess what happened. Call me when you can." Uncle Thomas was the family's quiet dissenter. My dad's older brother, a man who had chosen a life of restoring antique furniture over his brother's desperate climb up the social ladder. He was a craftsman, a man who understood that true value lies beneath the surface, in the quality of the wood, not the shine of the varnish. He was the only one who ever called just to see how I was, the only one who had ever told me he was proud of my career. I dialed his number without hesitation. "Jack," he answered on the first ring, his voice a calm anchor in my storm. "First things first. Are you okay? Honestly? I don't know what I am, Uncle Thomas." I admitted, the words tumbling out. "They kicked me out. Like I was garbage. After everything. I know, son. I heard the whole ugly story from your father's side, which means I heard about 10% of the truth. He told me you were trying to sabotage the wedding out of jealousy. He let out a dry chuckle. He conveniently omitted the part where they drove the knife in first, I assume? A raw, broken laugh escaped my own lips. Is it really that obvious? To anyone with eyes, it is. I've watched them do it for 30 years. You're the dependable one, so you get taken for granted. Emma's the star, so she gets a pass on everything. It's a sick system, Jack. And my biggest regret is that I didn't shout it from the rooftops sooner. It's not your fault, I mumbled. Maybe not, but I'm not staying quiet now. Listen to me, Jack. Do not let them guilt you. Do not let them gaslight you. Do not let them pull you back in. What you did tonight, freezing them out, that wasn't cruel. It was survival. It was the act of a man who finally realized his own worth. You hold your ground. You hear me? I hear you, I whispered, a thick lump forming in my throat. It was the first time all night I felt like I could breathe. It was the feeling of being seen. Good. You call me if you need a damn thing. A place to stay. An ear to bend. Anything. We hung up. My eyes fell on the single personal item on my desk. A small, silver-plated frame holding a photo of me and Emma on the beach at sunset. I was about 9, she was 5. I had my arm around her, and she was looking up at me with a smile of pure, uncomplicated adoration. For years, that photo had been my proof. Proof that once upon a time we had been a family. Proof that the woman she'd become wasn't the whole story. My hand reached for the frame. My fingers tightened around the cool metal. I didn't throw it. I didn't break it. With a slow, deliberate movement, I turned it face down on the desk. The past was a photograph, and I was finally done looking at it. The next day was a masterclass in psychological warfare. My phone became a hostile territory, a constant barrage of blocked calls and venomous text messages. I had silenced my parents and Emma, but the shrapnel from their explosion still found its way to me. Aunt Patricia, I am so disappointed in you, Jack. Your mother is a wreck. You should be ashamed. Dad's cousin, Mark, heard you're causing trouble. Not cool, man. Family is family. They were deploying the flying monkeys, the extended family members who only heard one side of the story and were all too eager to enforce the family's twisted code of loyalty. I blocked them all one by one. It was like playing a game of digital whack-a-mole. The real blow, however, came from the most public of forums. Facebook. I was scrolling through my feed, a mindless act of procrastination, when my blood ran cold. My mother had posted a new profile picture. It was a professionally taken photo of her, my dad, Emma, and her fiancé, Ryan, all posed at the picturesque vineyard venue. They were the perfect picture of familial bliss, their smiles wide and dazzlingly false. The caption was a work of art in passive aggression. A wonderful day of final planning with the family, feeling so blessed and excited for the big day. Hashtag family first, hashtag Suntob Mrs. Cooper, hashtag blessed life. The hypocrisy of hashtag family first was so potent it almost made me gag. But it was the comment section that was designed to be my public execution. An old family friend, a woman named Susan, had commented, "Stunning photo. The venue looks incredible. Can't wait to celebrate with you all. Will Jack be one of the groomsmen?" My mother's reply appeared just minutes later, timed for maximum impact. "Oh, Susan, you're so sweet. Unfortunately, Jack won't be able to make it. He's decided to take some time for himself. He's been under a tremendous amount of stress at work lately. We're heartbroken, of course, but we have to respect his decision to put himself first. We'll just have to miss him." My hands started to shake. I read it again. His decision. Heartbroken. Miss him. She had done it. She had perfectly and publicly framed my exile as my own selfish choice. In one fell swoop, she had painted herself as the loving, long-suffering mother, and me as the unstable, uncaring son who had abandoned his family in their time of joy. The rage that filled me was cold and sharp. This was no longer just about being uninvited. This was about the complete and utter annihilation of my character. They weren't content to just throw me away. They had to salt the earth where I stood so nothing could ever grow there again. That was the moment I knew. Ignoring them was not an option. Cutting off their funds was a good start, but it was a silent protest. They had made this public. They had lied about me in front of everyone I had ever known. My response had to be just as public, and it had to be irrefutable. I needed more than just my word against theirs. I needed proof. I needed a weapon. As if the universe had heard my silent declaration of war, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize, but the name attached to it in the group chat we shared via a mutual friend made my heart skip a beat. Kay Reynolds, Emma's bridesmaid. Hi Jack, this is Kay. I know this is incredibly weird and out of the blue. I'm so sorry to bother you. But can we talk? Please? Not on the phone. In person. It's about Emma. My mind raced. Why on earth would one of Emma's closest friends be contacting me, the family pariah? 1,000 suspicious scenarios played out in my head. Was it a trap? Were they sending her to spy on me to gauge my next move? But the tone of the text felt different. Felt nervous. Desperate. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We decided to meet the next day at a nondescript coffee shop in a neighborhood neither of us frequented. I spent the night staring at my ceiling, replaying every interaction I'd ever had with Kay, searching for a clue. I came up with nothing. The next afternoon, I spotted her huddled in a booth in the darkest corner of the cafe. She was clutching a coffee cup with both hands, as if for warmth, though the shop was stuffy. She looked like a cornered animal. "Thank you for coming," she said. Her voice so soft I had to lean in to hear her. "I swear, I'm not crazy. I couldn't live with myself if I didn't do this." "Do what?" I asked, keeping my own voice neutral. She took a shaky breath. "Warn you. And give you something. I've been a part of this wedding party for 6 months, Jack. The things I've heard, the way Emma and your mother talk about you, it's not just catty. It's cruel. It's a strategy." I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. "A strategy?" "Yes," she said, finally looking me in the eye. Her own were filled with a mixture of fear and guilt. "They call you their investment. They literally have jokes about how to leverage the asset. Emma bragged to the other bridesmaids about how she got you to pay her rent last spring. She said, and I quote, 'The trick with Jack is to make him feel like the family hero. You cry a little, mention how disappointed Dad is in his career, and he'll trip over himself to write you a check. It's foolproof.'" I felt the blood drain from my face. I knew it. I had always known it on some deep, intuitive level. But to hear it articulated, to know they had a name for it, a playbook for my manipulation, it was like finding out the monster under your bed was real, and it had been taking notes. "A few weeks ago, I couldn't take it anymore," Kay continued, her voice trembling. "I took Emma aside at her bridal shower and told her I thought it was messed up. I told her you were her brother, not a bank. She lost it." "What did she do?" "She threatened me," Kay whispered, her eyes darting towards the door. "She cornered me in the bathroom. She told me if I so much as breathed a word of this to anyone and ruined her perfect image for Ryan, she would destroy my career. She knows some things about my past, from when we were roommates. Stupid college stuff, but she'd twist it. She made it clear she would burn my life to the ground. After that, I started recording things. For my own protection." My heart began to pound, a slow, heavy drumbeat in my chest. This was it. She slid her phone across the table. "You need to hear this," she said. "You deserve to know who you're really dealing with." She pressed play. The first file was a recording of a phone call. Emma's voice, bubbly and fake. "Hey KK, so the final payment for the photographer is due. I was thinking, since Jack is already feeling guilty about not being involved enough, I could probably get him to cover it. It's only like $3,000. What do you think?" Then Kay's hesitant reply, "I don't know, Em. He's already done so much." Emma's voice turned cold in an instant. "Don't be a buzzkill, Kay. He can afford it. Honestly, it's the least he can do after being such a disappointment for so many years." My breath hitched. Kay swiped to the next file. It was a voicemail. A shrieking, venomous tirade Emma had left for Kay after their confrontation at the shower. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Emma's voice screamed from the tiny speaker, distorted with rage. "My brother is a pathetic, lonely man-child who buys his family's affection because it's the only way anyone will ever love him. He is a creep. Ryan can't stand him. And if you don't get back in line and play the part of the smiling, supportive bridesmaid, I will personally call your boss and tell him all about that little incident in Cancun. You will be fired and you will be friendless." Am I making myself clear? I stared at the phone, my entire body numb. The words, the sheer hatred in her voice. This was my sister. "There's one more," Kay said softly, her face pale. This one was muffled, as if recorded from inside a purse. It was a conversation between Emma and my mother. "Margaret, the key is to make Ryan think it's his idea. Keep telling him Jack has been acting unstable. Say you're worried about him making a scene. We'll plant the seed of his instability so that when we finally tell Ryan that Jack can't come, Ryan will actually be relieved." Protects everyone. It makes us look like concerned parents, and it solves the Jack problem. "Emma, I've already started. I told him Jack got super aggressive when I asked for a loan for the bachelorette party. He totally bought it. He thinks Jack's a ticking time bomb." Kay stopped the recording. The cheerful pop music of the coffee shop sounded obscene in the deafening silence that followed. My own mother, my own sister. It wasn't a sudden betrayal. It was a conspiracy. A slow, methodical, calculated campaign to gaslight a man they were bleeding dry and then dispose of his character so they could enjoy the fruits of their labor in peace. "It was never about the Coopers," Kay whispered. "It was about you. They wanted you gone." I looked at Kay, at the immense risk she had taken. She wasn't just a reluctant witness. She was a woman fighting back against a bully. "Thank you," I said, my voice hoarse and unfamiliar. "You may have just saved my life." "Just be careful, Jack," she warned. "She's your sister, but she plays for keeps." I walked out of that coffee shop into the bright afternoon sun, but everything looked different. The world felt sharper, harder. The grief and sadness I had felt were burned away, cauterized by the white-hot fire of the truth. I had the proof. I had the weapon. I pulled out my phone, my fingers steady. I scrolled through my contacts to a name I hadn't called in years, a woman whose number I'd kept filed under break glass in case of emergency. Her voice was as sharp and professional as I remembered. "Kristen Alvarez." "Kristen," I said, my own voice low and steady. "It's Jack Wilson. I'm going to war with my family, and I have no intention of losing." A beat of silence, and then a low, appreciative chuckle from her end. "Well, Jack, it's about damn time. Tell me everything." Kristen Alvarez's office was less of an office and more of a command center. It was on the 34th floor of a downtown skyscraper, with a panoramic view of the city that seemed to stretch on forever. The space was all glass, steel, and cool grays, furnished with a stark minimalism that screamed efficiency and control. It was the polar opposite of the chaotic, emotionally cluttered world I had just escaped. It was exactly what I needed. Kristen herself hadn't changed much since we'd worked together. She still had the same sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through any pretense, and the same no-nonsense demeanor. She didn't deal in sympathy. She dealt in solutions. I laid it all out for her, the text, the frozen bank account, the history of financial exploitation, and finally the audio files from Kay. I played them for her on my phone. She listened, her expression unreadable, her fingers steepled under her chin. She didn't interrupt once. When the last, damning voicemail from my sister faded into silence, she didn't offer condolences. She got down to business. "Okay," she said, her voice crisp. "The recordings are powerful, but emotionally charged. We need to strip them of emotion and turn them into cold, hard, undeniable evidence. First step is authentication." She explained the process. Her team would run a forensic analysis on the audio files, creating a verified, time-stamped chain of custody that would be legally admissible in any court. "By the time we're done," she said, No one can claim they were faked or taken out of context. They will simply be fact. Second, she continued, swiveling in her chair to face a large monitor, we build the narrative. Not your narrative or their narrative. The factual narrative. We need to corroborate everything. You mentioned a spreadsheet. I nodded, feeling a grim sense of vindication. The family tax. I've kept it for 5 years. Send it to me. Securely, she instructed. We'll cross-reference the dates of your major payouts with their social media activity. Let's see. You paid your sister's rent in March. What was she posting on Instagram a week later? A weekend spa trip to Napa, I said, the memory tasting like acid. Kristen smiled a thin, predatory smile. Exactly. We're going to create a timeline, a visual story. Your money goes out, their lavish lifestyle gets posted. It's a simple, powerful story of cause and effect. Over the next week, we worked like a special operations team planning a mission. Kristen's team authenticated the recordings and prepared a formal report. I sent her my spreadsheet, and she worked her magic, creating a slick, corporate-style presentation that laid out the financial data in brutal, undeniable charts and graphs. The title page read, The Wilson Cooper Wedding, a case study in familial asset mismanagement. It was cold, professional, and utterly devastating. While Kristen was building the arsenal, I was arranging the battlefield. I called Cynthia the venue manager for the vineyard. My relationship with her had been built on months of polite, professional correspondence. I was the reliable, organized brother of the bride who always answered his emails and paid his invoices on time. I had a surplus of goodwill with her. Cynthia, I said, injecting a warm, friendly tone into my voice. Jack Wilson here. I know this is incredibly last minute and please feel free to say no, but I had an idea. I'd love to prepare a little surprise for my sister at the rehearsal dinner. A short wedding video, a sort of tribute from her big brother. Would it be possible to get access to the projector and sound system for about 5 minutes during the toasts? Her response was exactly what I'd hoped for. Oh, Jack, that's the sweetest thing I've ever heard. Of course. What a wonderful personal touch. I'll make sure the staff knows to expect you and to give you whatever assistance you need. Just bring your presentation on a laptop or a USB stick, and we'll get you all set up. The Trojan horse was built and ready to be wheeled through the gates. Everything was in place. The plan was perfect. The evidence was ironclad. And as the day of the rehearsal dinner loomed, a cold, sickening dread began to pool in my stomach. I was sitting alone in my apartment, the city lights twinkling below. The final presentation file was open on my laptop screen. It was a masterpiece of logical destruction. And looking at it, I felt a wave of nausea. My eyes drifted to the small, silver-plated frame I had turned face down on my desk. My hand, as if with a will of its own, reached out and turned it back over. The photo of me and Emma on the beach. I was 9, she was 5. Her little hand was tucked into mine, and she was looking up at me with a gap-toothed smile of such complete, trusting love that it made my chest ache. Where did that little girl go? Was she still buried in there somewhere, underneath all the greed and the lies and the insecurity? She's your sister, a treacherous voice whispered in the back of my mind. Your only sister. You're about to drop a nuclear bomb on her life, on your parents' lives. Is this really who you are? A destroyer? My hand actually went to my phone. I was so close to calling Kristen, to calling the whole thing off. I could just disappear, vanish, let them have their victory, let them have their perfect, lie-filled wedding. My absence would be my answer. Wasn't that enough? The phone in my hand rang, startling me. The caller ID read Uncle Thomas. Just checking on my favorite nephew, he said, his voice a calm rumble. Getting ready for the big show tomorrow? He knew the gist of my plan, that I was going to confront them. He didn't know the details, but he knew I wasn't going down without a fight. My carefully constructed composure crumbled. I don't know if I can do it, Uncle Thomas. I confessed, my voice cracking. I feel sick. They're monsters, but they're my family. It feels like I'm about to burn down my own house. There was a long pause. I heard the familiar rhythmic rasp of sandpaper on wood from his workshop. "I'm looking at an old rocking chair right now, Jack," he said, his voice thoughtful. "Belonged to your great-grandmother. It's a beautiful piece. Strong bones. But one of the rockers is rotten clean through. Termites. If I leave it, the rot will spread to the rest of the chair, and the whole thing will be garbage." He paused again, letting the image sink in. "Now I can try to paint over it. I can try to pretend the rot's not there. But it is. And it's spreading. The only way to save this beautiful, strong chair is to take my saw and very carefully cut out the rotten piece. It'll leave a scar. It won't be the same chair it was before, but what's left of it will be saved. It will be strong and honest, and it will be able to stand on its own for another 100 years. His voice grew softer, more intense. "You're not burning down your house, Jack. You're the house, and you're cutting out the rot that's been eating you alive. What you're preserving tomorrow isn't them. It's you." A single, hot tear escaped and traced a path down my cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of release. He had given me the one thing I couldn't give myself: permission. Permission to save myself. My resolve returned, but it was different now. It wasn't cold and vengeful. It was clear and purposeful, like a surgeon preparing for a life-saving operation. "Thank you, Uncle Thomas," I said, my voice thick but steady. "I really needed to hear that. Anytime, kid. You go do what you have to do. Some things are too valuable to let them rot." I hung up the phone. I copied the presentation file onto a sleek, silver USB drive. I stood up and walked to my closet. I pushed past the casual clothes I lived in and pulled out the best suit I owned. A dark charcoal wool, tailored perfectly. It was a suit I'd bought for a job interview that had changed my life. It felt fitting to wear it for another life-changing event. I was going to a party. A farewell party for the man I used to be. The rehearsal dinner was a perfect caricature of my family's aspirations. It was held on a sprawling flagstone patio at the vineyard, overlooking rows of grapevines that glowed in the light of the setting sun. Dozens of fairy lights were strung through the branches of ancient oak trees, casting a soft, dreamy haze over the scene. Long tables were draped in white linen and adorned with elaborate floral arrangements. A string quartet was playing softly in the corner. It was elegant, it was expensive, and it was a complete and utter fraud. I circled around the main entrance, keeping to the shadows of the service path. I saw them all mingling and laughing. The Coopers, Ryan's family, were the clear center of gravity. Harold Cooper, the patriarch, was a stern-looking man in a tailored blazer, holding a glass of what was probably very old scotch. His wife, Melissa, was thin and brittle-looking, dressed in a silk dress that likely cost more than my first car. They were surrounded by a small circle of similarly wealthy friends, all exuding an air of bored entitlement. And then there was my family, orbiting the Coopers like desperate moons. My mother, Margaret, was in her element, flitting from guest to guest, her laugh a little too loud, her smile a little too wide. I watched her lay a hand on Melissa Cooper's arm, her face a perfect mask of fawning sincerity. My father, Robert, was standing next to Harold Cooper, nodding along to whatever the man was saying, trying to look like he belonged in a world he had only ever dreamed of entering. And Emma, my sister, was the star of the show, dressed in a stunning white dress that shimmered in the twilight. She was clinging to Ryan's arm, her head tilted up at him, her eyes wide with manufactured adoration. Ryan, for his part, looked handsome but distracted, a faint line of tension around his mouth. He was playing the part of the happy groom-to-be, but he looked like a man who was already tired. I slipped in through a side entrance near the catering tents, just as I'd planned. Cynthia, the venue manager, caught my eye from across the patio and gave me a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. Her professionalism was my shield. No one else paid me any attention. I was just another man in a suit, a ghost at their feast. I waited until the main course was cleared. The toasts began. The best man told a canned, vaguely amusing story about Ryan. Then the maid of honor, a woman I didn't recognize, stood up. She talked about Emma's fierce loyalty and incredibly generous heart. I had to physically restrain myself from laughing out loud. When she finished, Cynthia stepped smoothly to the microphone. "Thank you, Madison," she said, her voice bright and clear. "And now, it seems we have a special surprise. Emma's brother, Jack, has put together a little tribute for the happy couple." A wave of confusion washed over the patio. I saw my mother's wine glass pause halfway to her lips, her smile freezing on her face. Emma's head whipped around, her eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on me, widening in pure, unadulterated shock. My father just looked lost, his brow furrowed. Ryan's expression was the most interesting. It was a mixture of surprise and a flicker of something else, curiosity. I walked forward, my footsteps the only sound in the suddenly silent space. I felt 30 pairs of eyes on me, but my focus was entirely on the small family unit at the head table. I nodded politely at Cynthia as I reached the front, taking the microphone from her. "Thank you, Cynthia," I said, my voice calm and even, amplified by the speakers to carry to every corner of the patio. "I won't take up too much of your time. I just wanted to share a few family memories, to celebrate the journey that brought us all here tonight." I looked directly at Emma. Her face was pale, her knuckles white where she was gripping her champagne flute. I looked at my mother, whose eyes were shooting daggers at me, her lips forming a silent, furious, "What are you doing?" I turned to the large projection screen behind me and inserted the silver USB drive into my laptop. The screen flickered to life. The first image appeared. It was a beautiful, sun-drenched photo from Emma and Ryan's engagement shoot. A few of the guests clapped politely. "My sister, Emma," I began, my voice a smooth, narrative purr. "The star of our family. She has always been incredibly driven. She knows what she wants, and she knows how to get it." The slide changed. It was a screenshot of a text message from Emma to one of her bridesmaids. "OMG. The venue is a dream but so expensive. Time to deploy Operation Ask Jack. LOL. A few nervous chuckles rippled through the guests. They thought it was a roast, a funny sibling jab. Ryan's smile, however, faltered. He glanced at Emma, a question in his eyes. She forced a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "She's always known that family is the most important thing," I continued, my voice level. "A resource to be treasured." Click. The next slide. It was a clean, simple graphic. A screenshot from my Bank of America app, showing a $6,800 transfer to Emma Wilson. The memo line was stark. "Rent March." Click. A second screenshot. A $7,000 transfer to Robert Wilson. Memo. Loan August. Click. The screen was now filled with my spreadsheet. The family tax. A meticulous 5-year ledger of financial support. Dates, amounts, and reasons, from car repairs to credit card debt. The grand total at the bottom was displayed in a large, bold font, $45,850. An absolute, profound silence descended upon the party. The string quartet had stopped playing. The only sound was the chirping of crickets in the vineyard. The Coopers were staring at the screen, their faces hardening into masks of cold fury. Harold Cooper looked at my father with an expression of utter contempt. Melissa Cooper slowly, deliberately, placed her fork down on her plate, the clink echoing in the silence. "But of course," I said, my voice dropping into the quiet. "It was never just about the money. It was about trust. It was about the story we tell ourselves, and the stories we tell others." The screen went black for a dramatic beat, and then audio filled the air. It was a sound file, crisp and clear. Emma's voice, spitting venom. "Who the hell do you think you are? My brother is a pathetic, lonely man-child who buys his family's affection because it's the only way anyone will ever love him. He is a creep. Ryan can't stand him." Ryan physically recoiled, pulling his arm away from Emma as if her touch had burned him. He stared at her, his face a canvas of dawning horror and disbelief. The audio continued, relentless. "He's unstable. And if you don't get back in line and play the part of the smiling, supportive bridesmaid, I will personally call your boss and tell him all about that little incident in Cancun." Kay Reynolds, who was sitting at a side table, looked down at her plate, but I saw a small, vindicated smile touch her lips. Click. The next audio file. This time it was my mother's voice, smooth and conspiratorial. The key is to make Ryan think it's his idea. Keep telling him Jack has been acting unstable. Say you're worried about him making a scene. We'll plant the seed, so that when we finally tell Ryan that Jack can't come, Ryan will actually be relieved. Ryan's head swiveled slowly from Emma to my mother. His mouth was slightly agape. He looked like a man who had just discovered the world was not round. You said that? He whispered, his voice hoarse. I advanced to the final slide. The grand finale. It was a simple, stark screenshot of the text message that had started it all. The all-caps words seemed to scream from the screen. You're not coming to the wedding. Emma's family doesn't want you there. I let the image burn into the air for a long moment. I turned my body slightly to face Ryan directly. I want to be very clear, I said, my voice ringing with a clarity I had never felt before. I never decided not to come. I was never under too much stress from work. I was disowned. I was told specifically that your family did not want me here. But that was a lie, wasn't it? This was never about making a good impression on the Coopers. This was a calculated plan, executed by my own mother and sister, to portray me as an unstable burden so they could remove me from the picture without guilt. That's when Emma finally broke. Stop it! She shrieked, a raw, primal scream of a cornered animal. She lunged from her chair, her face contorted with rage, trying to get to my laptop. But Ryan's arm shot out, catching her by the bicep. His grip was like steel. Don't, he said, his voice low and shaking with a fury I had not known he possessed. Don't you touch him. He looked from Emma's stunned face to my parents, who looked like wax figures melting under hot lights. You lied to me, he said, his voice trembling. All of you. You built this entire relationship on a foundation of lies. You made me think. You made me complicit in this cruelty. My father, flustered, finally sputtered. Now, see here, son. It was a misunderstanding. Don't you dare call me son, Ryan snarled. He looked back at Emma, and the love in his eyes was replaced by something cold and dead. We're done. The wedding is off. It was like a dam breaking. My mother burst into loud, theatrical sobs. My father began shouting incoherently about disrespect and humiliation. Emma was pleading, grabbing at Ryan's arm, but he shook her off like she was a piece of trash. The Coopers, as a single silent unit, stood up, threw their napkins on the table, and walked away without a single backward glance. In the midst of the chaos, I was an island of calm. I methodically ejected the USB drive. I closed my laptop. I turned to Cynthia, who was watching the scene unfold with the unflappable poise of a seasoned professional. Thank you for your help, I said quietly. Then, without another word, I turned my back on the smoldering ruins of the perfect party and walked out into the cool, clean night air. I didn't need to look back. The symphony of their implosion was the most beautiful music I had ever heard. I didn't run. I simply exited. There's a difference. Running is panicked. Exiting is a choice. As I walked across the manicured lawn of the vineyard, leaving the shouting and sobbing behind me, I felt a lightness in my chest I hadn't experienced since I was a child. It was the feeling of a 50-pound pack being lifted from your shoulders after a long, grueling hike. I got into my car, the engine turning over with a quiet, reassuring hum. My phone, which I had left on the passenger seat, began to light up like a Christmas tree. A flurry of calls and texts. I didn't even look at the names. I picked it up, held down the power button, and watched the screen go black. The ensuing silence felt sacred. I drove north, not towards my apartment in the city, but away from it. I drove for hours, the monotonous rhythm of the highway a soothing balm on my frayed nerves. The city lights receded in my rearview mirror until they were just a faint, dirty glow on the horizon. And then they were gone completely, replaced by the profound, velvet darkness of the countryside. The air that rushed in through my open window smelled of pine and damp earth, a clean scent that seemed to scour the lingering stench of deceit from my lungs. My destination was a small, furnished cabin nestled in the mountains, a place I had found online and leased for 3 months under a private LLC I'd created for freelance work. It was my contingency plan, my fallout shelter. I had paid for it with my own money they didn't know about from a bank they couldn't touch. For 3 full days, I engaged in the radical act of doing nothing. I woke when the sun crested the mountains, not when my alarm clock shrieked. I made coffee in an old percolator and sat on the rough-hewn wooden porch, watching the morning mist burn off the valleys below. I took long, aimless walks in the woods, the crunch of leaves under my boots the only sound. I let the silence do its work. It was a slow, deep cleansing. The constant, low-grade hum of anxiety that had been the background noise of my entire adult life began to fade. In its place, a quiet stillness settled. I was learning the language of peace. On the 4th day, I reactivated my old phone. I wasn't looking for contact. I was a scientist observing a petri dish. The screen exploded with notifications. 97 missed calls. 214 text messages. 48 voicemails. It was a digital tapestry of their desperation. I didn't listen to the voicemails, but I scrolled through the text previews. A detached anthropologist studying the bizarre rituals of a fallen tribe. Emma, I can't believe you. You ruined my life. I hope you're happy. I hate you. I hate you. Mom. Jack, this has gone far enough. Your father and I are willing to forgive you if you apologize to the Coopers. Dad, you are no longer a part of this family. Do not contact us again. Emma, 3 hours later, please, Jack. I'm begging you. Ryan won't even look at me. You have to call him. You have to tell him it was all a big misunderstanding. Please. I'll do anything. Mom, the next day, I can't believe you're not answering. Your father is having chest pains from all the stress. Is this what you wanted, Jack? To put your father in an early grave. The pattern was so transparent it was almost pathetic. Rage followed by bargaining, followed by threats, followed by guilt. It was their entire emotional toolkit, and for the first time, none of the tools worked. They were trying to pick a lock that no longer existed. I spent the next hour methodically going through my contacts and blocking every single one of them. My parents, my sister, my meddling Aunt Patricia, my dad's cousin Mark. Each block was a snip of a thread, a severing of a tie that had been strangling me for years. When I was finished, my contact list felt lighter, cleaner. My new life began to take shape. I wasn't hiding. I was building. I enrolled in a series of online courses in archival science and historical preservation. I started volunteering twice a week at the County Historical Society, a charmingly dusty building filled with the ghosts of other people's families. I found a deep, meditative satisfaction in the work. I would spend hours carefully handling brittle 19th century letters, cataloging sepia-toned photographs of stern-faced farmers, and restoring old leather-bound ledgers. It was quiet, meticulous work. It was a history that couldn't be faked or manipulated. It was real. About a month into my new life, I got a call on my new, secure phone number. It was from the lawyer Kristen had recommended, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Maria. "Good morning, Jack," she said, her voice all business. "I have an update for you regarding your father." My stomach clenched, an old, reflexive habit. "Is he okay?" "He's fine," she said dryly. "But he's in a world of trouble. It appears that in the weeks before the event, he was attempting to secure a line of credit from a private lender to finance a business deal with Harold Cooper. A deal, I might add, that Mr. Cooper has since emphatically abandoned." She paused. "As collateral for this loan, your father offered a parcel of undeveloped land. A property my records show that is co-owned by you, your father, and your uncle Thomas Wilson. He forged your signature and your uncle's on the preliminary loan documents. I wasn't even surprised. It was just another gear in the same old, broken machine. The lender's legal team did their due diligence," Maria continued. "After the public implosion of the wedding, they became skeptical. They contacted my office to independently verify your signature. When I informed them you had not, in fact, signed anything, They withdrew the loan offer and have sent a letter to your father's attorney, mentioning potential charges for bank fraud. What should I do? I asked. Legally? Nothing. You're the victim here. My recommendation is that you cooperate fully with any investigation. Let the chips fall where they may. She paused. Personally, my recommendation is you change the batteries in your smoke detector and make sure your car insurance is paid up. Let the man deal with his own fire for once. I thanked her and hung up. I thought about my dad, about his blustering pride and his deep-seated insecurities. I felt a flicker of something, a distant echo of the old, conditioned sense of responsibility. But it was just an echo. The fire was his. I was done being his fireman. The next 6 months were a quiet revolution. As the seasons turned, painting the mountains in fiery reds and golds before blanketing them in a quiet shroud of white, the loud, garish colors of my former life began to fade from memory. The constant thrum of anxiety was replaced by the steady, rhythmic work of my hands. My partnership with Uncle Thomas became the cornerstone of my new existence. He wasn't just my mentor, he was my family. The kind of family that didn't come with ledgers and emotional invoices. He taught me the art of restoration, the quiet language of wood and time. I learned to read the history of a piece of furniture in its scars and water rings, to respect the craftsmanship of a hand-cut dovetail joint. You've got the touch, Jack, he'd say, running his hand over a tabletop I had just painstakingly refinished. You've got patience. Most people these days just want to slap a coat of paint on things. They want to cover up the imperfections. You're willing to do the hard work to bring out what's real underneath. His words meant more to me than any promotion or bonus I had ever received in my corporate life. We spent our days in the dusty, sweet-smelling workshop, the air thick with the scent of sawdust and linseed oil. We'd listen to old blues records and talk for hours, about woodworking, about history, about life. He told me stories about my father when they were boys, stories that painted a picture of a man always chasing something just out of his reach, always convinced the grass was greener somewhere else. It didn't excuse my father's behavior, but for the first time, it gave it a sad, human context. My therapy was the work itself. I took on a particularly challenging project, a beautiful but badly neglected 19th century secretary desk. It had been left in a damp basement for decades. The veneer was peeling, one of the legs was split, and the drawers were swollen shut. It looked like a lost cause. For weeks, I poured my energy into it. I spent hours carefully steaming and peeling away the damaged veneer, revealing the solid, beautiful mahogany underneath. I meticulously cleaned decades of grime from the intricate carvings. I learned how to mix my own wood glue and use clamps to mend the split leg, reinforcing it from the inside so it was stronger than the original. As I worked, I felt a parallel process happening within myself. I was stripping away the layers of false narratives and expectations that had covered my own life. I was mending the parts of me that had been broken, reinforcing my own foundations. One afternoon, I finally managed to pry open the last of the swollen drawers. Tucked away in the back was a small, hidden compartment. Inside was a bundle of letters, tied with a faded blue ribbon. They were love letters, written in elegant cursive, between the original owner of the desk and his wife, dated 1888. They were filled with tenderness, humor, and a deep, abiding affection. They were a testament to something real and lasting. I handled them with the reverence of a true believer. This was what was worth preserving. That same evening, an email notification popped up on my laptop. It was from my old email address, one I rarely checked anymore. My lawyer, Maria, had forwarded it to me with a simple note, FYI, your decision how or if to respond. The sender was my mother. The subject line, thinking of you. A cold wave of dread washed over me, but I opened it. It was long, a rambling, self-pitying monologue disguised as a letter. My dearest Jack, I hope this finds you well. The leaves are changing here, and it always makes me think of you. I know it has been some time since we spoke. Your father and I worry about you constantly. Life has been a challenge since that terrible night. As you may have heard, we had to sell the house. Your father's business prospects, they dried up. The stress of it all has taken a toll on his health. We are in a small, 2-bedroom apartment now. It's hard to get used to. I see your father staring out the window for hours, and my heart just breaks. Emma is struggling. She had to move back in with us. The shame of the wedding being called off was too much for her. She lost her job, and she rarely leaves her room. She feels that her life is over, and I know she carries a great deal of regret. She says you were right about Ryan, that he was weak. I know you believe we wronged you, but I hope, with time, you can understand the pressure we were under. We only ever wanted what was best for Emma. A mother's love can sometimes make her do foolish things. Perhaps we made a mistake. But is a mistake enough to throw away your entire family? We are still your mother and father. She is still your sister. Blood is thicker than water, Jack. I pray you can find it in your heart to forgive us, so that we can all begin to heal. We miss the man you used to be. Love always, Mom. I read it 3 times, each time with a growing sense of detached horror. The complete and utter lack of accountability was breathtaking. There was no apology. They weren't sorry for what they did. They were sorry for the consequences they were now facing. They didn't miss me. They missed the role I played. They missed their fixer, their ATM, their emotional janitor. And the final line, we missed the man you used to be. That was the tell. They missed the man who would have swallowed their abuse and paid for their comfort. That man was dead and buried. I clicked reply. The cursor blinked on the blank page. I thought of 1,000 things to say, 1,000 ways to catalog their crimes. But what was the point? It wouldn't change them. It would only drag me back into their toxic orbit. So I wrote the only reply that mattered. 6 simple words. I wish you peace in your life. It was not forgiveness. It was not anger. It was dismissal. It was the calm, quiet closing of a door, not slamming it shut, but locking it for good. I hit send. Then I created a final, permanent filter. All emails from them, from anyone in their circle, were now routed directly to the trash, unread. My past was no longer my mail. The next day, I showed the love letters from the old desk to Uncle Thomas. His eyes lit up. Well, I'll be, he breathed. This is history, Jack. This is the real thing. He looked at me, a proud smile on his face. I'm retiring at the end of the year, kid. For real this time. The shop is yours. The name, the tools, the goodwill. It's all yours. You've earned it. He handed me a set of old, ornate brass keys. They felt heavy and solid in my hand. They felt real. 1 year to the day after the rehearsal dinner. The autumn air in the mountains was crisp and clean, smelling of wood smoke and decaying leaves. The shop, now officially just Wilson's Restoration and Preservation, was quiet. I was putting the finishing touches on the old secretary desk, polishing the new brass handles I'd sourced to match the originals. It was no longer a wreck. It was a masterpiece, its mahogany grain glowing with a deep, rich luster. It was ready to go to its new home, a local historian who I knew would cherish it. The bell above the shop door jingled, a cheerful, familiar sound. I looked up, expecting a regular customer or a delivery. My heart gave a single, hard jolt. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the bright afternoon light, was Ryan. I hadn't seen him since he'd walked out of his own rehearsal dinner. A year of silence. He looked different. He'd lost the soft, privileged look he'd had. He was thinner, and there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. He wore a simple flannel shirt and jeans, not the expensive blazer I remembered. He looked real. My hand instinctively tightened on my polishing rag, a flicker of the old defensiveness. But it passed quickly. He wasn't a threat. He was a ghost from another life. Jack, he said, his voice quiet. He gave a small, awkward nod. I was just passing through the area. Saw the sign. I hope this is okay. It's okay, Ryan, I said, surprised at how steady my own voice was. Come on in. He stepped inside, his eyes taking in the organized chaos of the workshop, the tools hanging on the pegboard walls, the scent of wood and oil, the pieces of furniture in various states of repair. Wow, he said, a note of genuine surprise in his voice. This is really incredible. It suits you. Thanks, I said. It's honest work. An awkward silence stretched between us, filled only by the ticking of an old grandfather clock in the corner. Look, he said finally, turning to face me. He shoved his hands in his pockets. I'm not here for Emma. I'm not here to ask you for anything. I haven't spoken to her or any of them in almost a year. I'm here for me. He took a deep breath, like a man about to dive into cold water. I came here to apologize, face to face. I was an arrogant fool, Jack. I was lazy and I was a coward. I let myself be sold a story because it was easier than looking at the truth. The truth was that I was marrying into a family of sharks, and I was about to be the next meal. I judged you, I dismissed you, and I stood by while they treated you like dirt. I am sorry. For my part in all of it, I am truly and deeply sorry. I listened to his words and I knew they were real. There were no excuses, no deflections. It was the clean, hard ring of accountability. I found myself nodding. Thank you, Ryan, I said. I appreciate you saying that. I've been in a lot of therapy, he admitted with a small, wry smile, trying to figure out my own patterns, why I was so drawn to that particular brand of chaos. Turns out, my own family wasn't much better, just quieter about it. He looked at the restored secretary desk. Emma, she tried to contact me a few months ago, sent me a long, rambling email blaming you, blaming me, blaming her parents, blaming everyone but herself. I got a similar one, I said. He nodded, not surprised. What you did that night, it was brutal. It was a demolition. But you know what? It was also a rescue mission. You rescued yourself. And in a strange, messed up way, you rescued me too. You forced me to see what was right in front of my face. He looked around the workshop again. Do you ever regret it? Do you ever wish you'd just walked away quietly? I thought about his question for a long time. I looked at my hands, at the calluses and the faint stain of cherry would polish under my fingernails. I thought of the quiet satisfaction of a perfectly mended joint. I thought of my morning coffee on the porch with Uncle Thomas. I thought of the peace that settled over me each night, a peace that was once a foreign concept. I've learned a lot about preservation this past year, I said finally, meeting his gaze. The most important lesson is that you can't save everything. Some things are too rotten, too far gone. If you try, the rot just spreads. The real skill is learning to see what is fundamentally strong, what has integrity, what is worth the time and the effort to bring back to life. I gestured around the shop. This is worth it. My peace is worth it. My self-respect is worth it. I gave him a small, sad smile. Some things, and some people are just meant to be left in the past. A look of profound, quiet understanding passed over his face. He nodded slowly. I get that, he said. I really do. Well, I'm glad you're okay, Jack. More than okay. He gave me one last nod, then turned and walked out of the shop, the bell jingling his departure. Later that evening, back in my cabin, I opened the old sea chest at the foot of my bed. I pulled out the small, restored wooden box where I kept a few important documents. Tucked in the back was the folded photograph of the two kids on the beach. I took it out and looked at it one last time. I felt a pang, not of anger, but of a distant, sorrowful pity for the boy in the photo, for the years he would spend trying to earn the love of people who were incapable of giving it. I placed the photo back in the box on top of the deed to the shop. It was no longer a source of pain or hope. It was just a document, an artifact from a bygone era. Piece of history. I closed the lid, the soft click echoing in the quiet room. It was the sound of a final, peaceful closure. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it touched you in some way. Have you ever been in a situation where walking away was the only way to save yourself? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what's next.